In Rostov, Russia, 10,000 tons of Siberian crude go up in flames. And that oil? It was important. It was the liquidity for a black market settlement. Meanwhile, 4,000 miles away, a phone rings in Bogota. It's Crocus calling. A Russian fixer tells a cartel broker that the collateral is gone, and the fallout is instantaneous, because somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, a ghost tanker cuts its engines. Its GPS goes dark. Without oil to back the debt, the microchip deal will never go through. A $3,000 drone just paralyzed a $300 million transaction. And this is the reality of the shadow pipeline. It's something you've probably never heard about, but this is the truth of Russia today. If you want to really understand the multi-billion-dollar industry, the hidden economy that Russia is engaged in, you'll understand Russia much better. Because today we see that Russian intelligence brokered a merger with violent syndicates. It is a logistics of lawlessness. The Russian military intelligence, the GRU, and the Sinaloa Cartel share offshore bankers. They have the same shadow contractors. They work with allies in Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, and Cuba. And these sanctioned regimes collaborate with others, like Hezbollah and the FARC. One cleanses fentanyl cash, and the other buys drone sensors. And this today is the most dangerous protection racket in history. It is a global merger of rogue states and of criminal organizations. And every machine, though, has one choke point. And today we're seeing that its heart just skipped a beat. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kyiv Post and National Security Advisor. So after the collapse of the USSR, Russia pioneered the modern template for state crime fusion. The Soviet collapse shattered enforcement, courts, and basic financial trust. Privatization created sudden fortunes without secure property rights. Violence and intimidation became a business service, not an exception. Protection became a market, and the market needed professionals. Former officials from the security services moved into the protection economy because the state could not pay them, and the state could not control the streets. And many ex-KGB and military veterans entered into private security and business protection. Some worked alongside criminal groups, and some competed with them. The result was the same. Criminals gained access to tradecraft and to networks. Business gained access to coercion, surveillance, and deniable muscle. Putin rose out of that environment, a KGB officer who entered city power as the racket economy started to harden. The state recombined with the protection market instead of destroying it. The Russian concept of protection, or Krisha, became the operating model. A protection umbrella promised safety from rivals and safety from the police. It often meant that the police and the umbrella were connected. It turned enforcement into a revenue stream instead of a constraint. And as you've noticed, one thing cutting into Russia's revenue these days is drones. So if you'd like to help the Ukrainians to get more drones, check out the first pinned comment below with the question of the day. Right below it, you'll see how you can help the Ukrainian soldiers get what they need to help survive this winter and for Ukraine to defeat the Putin mafia. Thank you. So under Vladimir Putin, the security state consolidated, but it did not erase the criminal ecosystem. It absorbed parts of it, it disciplined other parts of it, and it used parts of it because deniable actors are useful when the state wants distance. That produced a Russian export. Coercion plus cover plus logistics sold through intermediaries. That export is the bridge to Russia's global partnerships that are currently under sanction. Who Russia works with globally is not one alliance. It's a marketplace of shared corridors. Russia works through contracting logic, and not a friendship logic. Moscow needs corridors, cutouts, and settlements that keep cash moving, even though there's increasing sanction pressure. So it converges with actors that already run covert logistics, and they also work with those that have covert finance. And the cartel side is cash generation at scale. The Sinaloa Cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartels are two of the most dominant Mexican networks tied to mass synthetic drug trafficking. They generate the core problem the shadow market is able to solve: huge cash flows that must be converted to usable value. Cash needs laundering. Laundering needs brokers. And brokers, they need protection. The Venezuela side is a corridor, and it's known for its permissiveness and the fact that it has protected transit. A corridor that can move narcotics and cash can also, though, move sanctioned cargo, gold, and high risk procurement. Corridor states matter far more than this ideology. Think about Iran and their side in this. Iran has hard currency scarcity and has sanction evasion demands. A collapsing currency forces commerce into informal dollars, gold, and alternative settlement. Iran's system then relies more on intermediaries who can move value without normal banking. Iran's proxy ecosystem expands the same logic, deniable movement of funds and logistics. Or think about Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a connector in parts of Latin America. In fact, did you know that Hezbollah, one of its strongest bases, is Latin America, not the Middle East? It has been publicly described by the U.S. Treasury as operating through facilitators, commercial fronts, and trade-based schemes. It has also been publicly described as intersecting with Venezuela-linked finance nodes. And this is how Middle East proxy finance touches Latin America and its corridor geography. But once these corridors exist, intelligence services do not need to run them. They only need to manage access to them. Where the Russian intelligence service fits into this is first with its leverage, corridor management, and deniable external access. The FSB's role is corridor management inside of Russia specifically. It decides which facilitators are protected and which are sacrificed. It polices rivals harder than it polices the system. Because the system, it funds the regime. This turns the corridor competition into a political conflict. Think of the SVR. That's the Foreign Intelligence Service of Russia. What it does is it manages recruitment, operational cover. It works to identify brokers, fixers, intermediaries who can provide routing, paperwork, and settlements. It reduces attribution by keeping the state one step away from the transaction. And this is where criminal logistics becomes strategically useful, because criminal logistics specializes in distance. Under pressure, criminals gain leverage because they control the corridor. And under pressure, the state gains optionality because it can use the corridor without signatures. And that is the operating logic of deniable logistics. Consider Viktor Bout. He shows what deniable logistics looks like in real life. Viktor Bout belongs in this story because he is the archetype of post-Soviet deniable logistics. Viktor Bout was convicted in the United States for conspiring to sell weapons to the FARC, a revolutionary leftist organization in Colombia. The point is not this man, though, it is the model. Russian-linked logistics selling industrial-scale supply to a designated insurgent organization. That model thrives where normal banks and normal shipping cannot operate. The shadow market works because it sells three things at once: distance between the state and the act, logistics that bypass normal controls, and settlement that can survive enforcement pressure. Corporate camouflage, though, is also important. That is how they're able to hide what is actually going on. Russia uses this sort of camouflage to hide ownership, pay for procurement, and move elite wealth. They use things like shell firms and nominee directors. They create delays, and delays enough to move value. The same structure can own a ship. A ship can carry oil, and an invoice can move the value for that. Now, Iran and Hezbollah use corporate camouflage to keep fundraising and procurement resilient under sanctions. Commercial fronts can look like normal trade while functioning as a payment bridge. And when one company burns, another replaces it, and the corridor then survives. Venezuela corridor actors use corporate camouflage to turn protection into deniable business. Layered ownership and offshore structures make enforcement slower and more contested. Slow enforcement is the commodity that they are selling. Trade-based laundering is the paperwork service, though, that many people need. It turns a commerce into a settlement mechanism. Hezbollah-linked networks have been publicly described using trade-based schemes. Value moves through invoices, cargo descriptions, and mispriced goods. Prices, quantities, and origins can be adjusted to move the hidden value. And Russia, it uses invoices and their manipulation to help with its own efforts to reduce sanction friction. The invoice becomes camouflage and settlement logic when banks are dangerous. The goal is plausibility long enough to settle and then to repeat this all again. But there's something else that's important. A trade narrative launders legitimacy, and that's very important. When you think of what a country does like Venezuela, they need that. Because when they are trying to do something like wash gold or wash cash or to move narcotics proceeds, they have to have a system for that. They can't do it easily. So they've built up an entire system that works together. And it all makes a lot of sense. All these different organizations work together logically. Why would they not? If you are a sanctioned actor, such as Hezbollah, or a terrorist organization, such as FARC, or a drug cartel, like Sinaloa, or a country that's sanctioned, such as Nicaragua, such as Russia, such as Venezuela, such as North Korea, you all have something in common. You can do business with each other. And so you each figure out how you can work together, what it is that each one can do to contribute to their ability to continue operating. That's how it is today. Now, decades after the U.S. introduced sanctions against Iran, their aircraft still fly. How do they get around those sanctions? Lots of practice. Iran gets away with it due to off-book settlement. And today we see that how they move value is very similar to how Russia now moves value. They work closely together to figure out how to beat sanctions. Well, that's why we've seen the rise of things like stable coins and e-currencies. It's becoming increasingly popular, an anonymous means of moving money that nobody can easily find out the ownership of. So if you can use this, you can get around sanctions. Why not work together on this? Why is it not in their interest if they have a supply and a demand? The drug cartels have tons of cash. These countries need cash. They need foreign currency. And it's very convenient. Those cartels have houses full of foreign currency, dollars and euros, that they don't know how to use. So if Russia is willing to take that in, it's willing to exchange it for things such as for cryptocurrency, that's something that works just fine for the Russians. There is a lot of opportunities that come from this. So the current system that we see today in Russia, the takeaway of this is that though it appears that the sanctions are hurting Russia, they are, most certainly. There are some people becoming very rich because of these sanctions. And one of the people that is benefiting from the sanctions on a personal level is undoubtedly Vladimir Putin. And that's why today, Vladimir Putin, he doesn't like the sanctions, of course. He's against them. However, there are worse things that could happen to him. In the eyes of Vladimir Putin, the sanctions are sort of a positive. Keep in mind, there are some people making a lot of money due to these sanctions. The FSB, for instance, it's in charge of the Shadow Fleet. That Shadow Fleet has made a lot of money for people that are the constituency of Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin's goal is not to make his people happy. It is not that the Russian people will live better. Vladimir Putin's goal is to stay in power. That is his first and primary and only objective above all else, is to make sure he doesn't lose power. But to assure his fate, he has to make sure that those in the FSB are happy. And the way that he keeps them happy is by allowing them to work in the global organized crime world. And today, we see that there is, in fact, a mafia that they are in charge of. Ultimately, when we look at the situation, there's a very easy conclusion we can come to. The fact is that every country has a mafia. But in the case of Russia, the mafia has a country. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and consider becoming a channel member today. And please do check out that first pinned comment below where you'll see the question of the day. Leave me your response below. And please check out right below that how you can help the Ukrainian soldiers and Ukraine get the equipment they need to survive this winter. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.